Hey, we're gonna do the full review of the 2024 KTM 300 XCW right now. Okay, the first thing I wanna call out that they got absolutely right and they knocked it out of the freaking park are these forks. These are the new closed cartridge exact forks. It's a spring fork. It is incredible. These are the best forks I have had on any stock dirt bike. Let me say that again. These are the best valved forks I have ever seen on a stock dirt bike. For what I'm doing, the type of riding that I'm doing, which is mostly like single track in the mountains or single track in the desert where you're hitting a lot of hard edges and like sharp edges and rocks and roots and things like that, this thing absorbs that stuff better than anything. It's linear throughout the stroke. It is the best fork, best valve fork. They have on the XC bikes in the 2024, it's the same fork, but it's valved more stiffly. So that's for going faster in the desert. But this thing on the XCWs is valved primo for me. Love, love, love the forks. Before I get too deep into this, I should mention if you're watching this video before September 30th at midnight on 2023, you can still enter to win the 300 XCW and the 250 XC. I'm giving both of them away. Click the link right down here to get entered. The second thing that I do think they knocked out of the park is the TBI motor. So this is the throttle body motor. It has an electronic power valve, which is smooth throughout the RPM range. It runs really great at any altitude. It's smooth, it's tractable, and yes, it does have a softer mapping than what the XCs do. They moved the XC and the XCW further apart as far as the engine mapping, but this actually is better for the riding that I'm doing most of the time in the single track, in the mountains, in the enduro situations. It isn't as much of a fire-breathing dragon, and so it doesn't light up the rear wheel as quickly. That I think is a big win for KTM. There's going to be a lot of people that are always trying to make their XCW maybe run more like an XC. Those people, you can do that all you want, and that's fine, and that's great and dandy. But I'm just saying it's a huge strength for this bike. The motor is amazing. The electric start is amazing. The power valve is amazing. They just run absolutely, absolutely fantastic. This is the best running. These between this and the XC, these are the best running two-stroke motors you can get. They're counterbalanced. They hardly vibrate at all. They start quick. They're amazing. It's just, they've knocked that sucker out of the park. Another pretty cool thing that I still say is a hit is the oil injection. There's a ton of people that don't want to have to mix fuel in their gas, and you will not have to do that with this bike. You put your oil up in here, up in this oil reservoir, and then you're just putting straight pump gas, the highest octane you can get, right into the fuel tank, and it mixes the fuel for you. I've never had a fuel pump go bad. If your fuel pump goes bad, I mean your oil pump, if your oil pump went bad, yeah, you could burn down the motor. Maybe some people have probably had that happen. I've never had it happen. I've never known personally somebody that's had that happen, and I'm still saying oil injection is great on this bike. If you don't want oil injection, you can get the XC, and then you'll be pre-mixing the fuel, or pre-mixing oil in the fuel. But I'm saying because I like the fact that KTM has one bike that is oil injected and one bike as far as like the XC that isn't oil injected, so I say it's a hit. Another thing I think is a hit is that they still have the PDS. So the PDS is where the shock mounts on the top of the swing arm. The advantage to this is that there's nothing down here to catch on roots or catch like when you drop off of a ledge or anything like that. You don't hit the linkage. You don't need a special huge skid plate that is covering that linkage. It's less maintenance, it's less weight. It's simpler. And when the bike is set up properly with the right amount of sag for what the chassis dictates, I can't tell any difference in the rear end as far as traction when I'm out on the single track and trails and doing enduro type stuff. But I do prefer not having the linkage there when we're doing like some of the nastier trails and things like that. So, and I'm glad that they kept it because they've amalgamated a lot of their parts on a lot of the different models to kind of like reduce, I think, the number of like parts that they have to stock and make. And I was almost concerned that they would drop the PDS because it's only in the KTM XCW line that they have this. In the gas line, it's all linkage. In the Husqvarna line, it's all linkage. So the XCW and KTM is the only one that has the PDS. I'm glad that they still have it. I think it's a hit. Other things that I think are a hit, finger clickers. You have finger clickers even here on the rebound on your shock. So you got finger clickers here. You've got finger clickers here on the high speed and the low speed. I think that's so awesome. And I have used these out on the trail. You've got finger clickers up here for your compression. You got finger clickers down here for your rebound on the forks. It's just great. I love having the finger clickers. It just makes it so much simpler. And I wish more companies than just WP would put finger clickers on things. That's a hit. Spin this sucker around. See that headlight? That is actually the brightest headlight I've seen on a stock dirt bike. Can you get brighter headlights? Sure, you can. But this is the brightest headlight that I've seen on a stock dirt bike, and I think that's a win. It's an LED headlight. They say it's like 200% brighter than what the old one was. I don't know. I will say though, that is the brightest headlight that I've seen on a stock bike, and I think that is a win. Other things I love about these bikes, you've got the Brembo brakes, you've got the Brembo clutch. These are the best brakes in the industry. And I mean, you've got it in the front and the rear. I've used other brakes. I don't like the brake tech as much. I never liked the Magura quite as much. I don't like the Nissan brakes as much, especially on the front. This gives you exceptional feel, exceptional control. I only ever need to use one finger on the brake, and that is great. And then on the clutch too, they just have a nice clutch. There's a nice clutch feel to them. On some of the other bikes, even like on my TM and on some Shercos and stuff, even though they'll have like a Brembo clutch, master cylinder, my hand gets more tired on a lot of those bikes. And so I don't know if it's just like the springs that they have, but also the clutches on these KTMs are freaking bulletproof. I've had, I don't even know, 50 of these bikes throughout the years. I've never had a single problem with a clutch. Never one problem with any clutch. You can use them as like a hydrostatic transmission on these suckers. As long as you keep clean oil in there, I mean, they're pretty freaking amazing. Another hit that I just have to talk about is that this bike still has a decent enough stator that you can run a headlight and a fan at the same time and other accessories. On this bike, I decided to put the radiator fan on here that is controlled by the ECU, which is nice because there's a power wire right up in here, you have to tear everything off, but there's a power wire right up in here, which is a control wire where it's running this fan based off the ECU. You don't get to control the temperature it comes on. There are some other options like the TrailTech fan that you can use where it's a digital fan where you can control at what temperature the fan comes on. But this one has been great for me, and it was nice. It's just clean setup because it's controlled. It's controlled with a relay, so it doesn't run when the bike is off, and it's just kind of been nice. But the stator is good. The stator sucks on the XC bikes. The stators on the XC bikes do not have enough power to run basically anything. But still on the XCWs, this has enough power to run that stuff. Hey, are you wanting to know how you can support Dirt Bike Channel without costing yourself like an extra dime? Use my link to Rocky Mountain ATV. It's down in the video description, or it's on my website, dirtbikechannel.com. You click on that link and then you buy anything that Rocky Mountain ATV sells, and it gives me a kickback. So you're gonna spend the money anyway, so you might as well use my link. Rocky Mountain ATV is the best in the business. Use my link and support Dirt Bike Channel and get your stuff. All right, now I'm gonna rip off a few things that I don't love about the bike, because not everything KTM does I think is good for like the enduro off-road stuff. A lot of these things a lot of the changes kind of trickle, most of the changes in all of these bikes, depending on, it doesn't matter if you're talking KTM, Honda, Yamaha, whatever, a lot of them trickle down from motocross or supercross or whatever. And not all those changes actually work super great in enduro, okay? So let me tell you one thing that I don't like as much on the 24s versus the 23s, the turning radius on this bike. These bikes used to turn tighter. You used to be able to turn the handlebars a little bit further over. Now you don't get, you used to have like some steering stops that you could take out forever on these XC and XCW frames. Now you don't have that, and it just is what it is, and you don't get as tight of a turning radius. This really only comes into play when you're in really tight situations, tight enduro stuff. It's either on a tight switchback or you just have a kind of a tight change of direction or whatever, and you're on full lock. This bike doesn't turn as tight, and I don't like that as much. Another thing that is taking some getting used to is just the frame is stiffer overall. Like they really stiffened up the frame. And in the XC bike on the 2023, it was kind of a big deal because like the forks were just too stiff. Everything was too stiff. This bike I wouldn't say is too stiff on the forks, but the frame is so stiff that it's been harder to kind of get things in balance. They biased the bike so much more to the front wheel. It feels like to me that it kind of has pulled traction off of the rear. And so that's been something that I've tried to get is I've just tried to it has been more challenging to get traction on the rear of this bike than any of the other XCWs that I've ever had. And it also doesn't feel quite as nimble, okay? So it just feels like a longer bike. It used to be that the XCW, when you're riding it, it just felt compact and nimble. Now it feels more like the XC, which it feels like more, it's like a longer, it feels like this way, it's longer and more stable. It's almost like, you know, they made the bike to go faster, but it's not really like, and the bike is fast, right? But it's almost like they biased some of these things to make the bike be biased to the front wheel so it gets a lot of front end traction and go super, super fast, but it's not valved to go super, super fast like the XC is. So I just feel like it's kind of a tale of two different bikes. But the traction on the rear has been harder, so I've had to run a little bit more sag on this thing. I'm even up to like 113, 114 millimeters of sag, and then I've sped up my rebound quite a bit, and then I get better traction on the bike. But I still don't know that it's as much traction as I used to get on the old frames. So that's just something to think about. Something else I'm not in love with is the front fender. See how you have these little like Tang fan flippy like winglet things here on this fender? They probably have some reason that they think that's great in motocross, but all it really does is it just makes it annoying to wash the bike. It just is harder because you got all these like tabs sticking out there. And I think it's kind of dumb. The front fender is actually pretty wide, which you kind of get used to, but it's just these little tabs in here. I think they're dumb and it makes it harder to wash the bike. Another thing I think is a miss are these radiator shrouds. They have the radiator shrouds so they come way out here, super out. It's like so far out. It doesn't need to be that far. Come on, guys. It just kind of makes the bike look weird. And then also they've got like a proprietary thing with the plastics. So it's been harder for any of these companies, like aftermarket companies, to make plastics for this. It's like they can't do it. KTM like licensed it or something. I'm not exactly sure. Don't quote me on any of this stuff. I just know it's been harder to get aftermarket plastics that are just like this, but I don't even want it like this because it's just too far out. I don't like it. They probably have their reasons, and I think it's so that your boot doesn't hook on the thing when you're railing a sand berm or whatever, but we're not railing sand berms on this, so we don't need that. So the plastics I haven't absolutely loved on that. One more thing that I'll harp on is the fuel pickup spot. So the fuel pickup spot on this bike is actually, there's like a fuel cup under here with the fuel tank, and it's actually up higher than where the tank comes down. So you'll have fuel down here on this side of the tank and on the other side of the tank where you've still got some fuel up in there, and that fuel has to splash up into this like little higher fuel pocket here in the middle, which I can't really show you because the fuel pickup is up there. Now, I asked KTM why they did this when I was at one of their events, and they said, watch how I'm just turning this around. What they said was, well, they wanted to remove the fuel petcock from right here because on the old bikes, it came from right here. And so they were taking it away from there so it doesn't break off, which is a good thing, you know, because it's like, if you don't have like this petcock right down here or whatever, you're not gonna be able to break that. So that's a good thing. But then the fuel pickup is just right up in here in like a little cup that's there. And what that means is you'll have fuel down here that has to splash up. And if you're bouncing around and whatever, it probably will, but I just feel like the fuel light will come on. I don't want to say exactly how many miles because it depends on the terrain, it depends on the day, but your fuel light will come on sometimes at 50, 55 miles, even though I think you've probably got 60, 65, 70 miles that you could go if the fuel would splash up in there. So I do know that there have been some people that have actually ran out of fuel on the bike, and you don't want to do that because then it's like sometimes you could have a hard time getting it to prime back up. So you want that fuel to be, it has to kind of, if you're on, say you were on a road at the end of a ride and it wasn't bouncing around, you could run out of fuel even though you still have fuel down here. Not ideal. So I wish that there was like a pickup, like if they would run some sort of a pickup thing down here, at least on this is the lowest side of the tank. The other side doesn't go down quite as low, but if they ran a pickup line down here, it could solve the problem, but they don't. So that's a mess. I should probably also mention that these now have a different transmission than what they had before. It's still more of a wide ratio transmission, but it's not the same as what they had. As near as I can tell, it's the same gearing and the same trans as the XC now, which they changed them both. And I guess it's probably okay on the XCW, but your final drive is different. You'll have a 13-tooth front sprocket, and I believe they came with a 45-tooth rear sprocket. I ended up gearing this one down just a little bit, which didn't help first gear, but it did kind of help, it helped second gear and third gear. So I've played around with that one. This one, I put a 47-tooth sprocket on it, and it's pretty good. So here's like in conclusion, for most of the riding that I do, the XCW is now the better bike for me. I used to love the XCs, and I still do like the XCs a lot, and the XC has like a more hot power map, and it has some of these things, but it's just very, very stiff. And then the fact that the XC doesn't have a good stator on it, and this fork is valved mostly how I want. For most intents and purposes, for my riding, the XCW is now the better bike over the XC, because the XC just moved over more closer to like the motocross bikes. Whereas this is still more of the enduro bike, and I get why KTM did it. So, I mean, man, this is a freaking amazing bike. I really like this bike. I want to, it is still, I think, the best bike for me overall from all the different brands for the type of riding that I do most of the time. It just is the best bike for that. And I'm sticking to that. Like, there's a ton of polish, it's got the right brakes, it's got the right clutch, it's got an amazing motor, it's just got all of these things. It's easy to ride, it's easy to start, it's easy to do all that stuff. And so for me, this is the best. You know, whether we can debate on the 250 versus the 300, you know, ideally I'd have a 250 XC, which I have one right here, which you can win if you're watching this still in September, but you better hurry. Click the link right down here in the video description before midnight on September 30th and get entered to win. Grab a shirt, grab a hat, grab anything I still have left over there. But these are amazing bikes. Not everything they did on it was right, but it's still, I think, the best bang for the buck and the best bike for me for the type of riding that I'm doing. So there you go. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your support. Use the links down in the video description. Use my links to Rocky Mountain ATV, and that helps to support this thing. If you've ever bought anything from me or used the links, you're literally the reason why this channel still exists. Your support is needed now more than ever. Thank you so much. If you have questions, you can email me, Kyle@dirtbikechannel.com, and I will try to get back to you in a timely fashion. Might take me a couple of days. And until next time, thanks for watching, and leave a single track.